So at the end of my Lost Frontier video, I teased that I was going to make another video on Jak and Daxter, and that video is going to be me ranking all the Jak games from worst to best. Now the hard thing about ranking this series is that none of the games are inherently terrible. The series has been pretty consistent since the first Jak game all the way up to Daxter on the PSP. I mean, it doesn't mean that they're flawless, but it's still pretty cool how this series doesn't really have that many bad games. So before we start this ranking, I just want to know that this is all my opinion, so it's okay for you to disagree with me, especially with number 1. So if your favorite game is not at the top of the list, please don't go crying in the comments, because you're just wasting your energy. So that being said, let's start the list off with the worst.
We won't let those fuckers take this land!
I mean, what the f*** do you want me to say? This is probably one of the biggest missed potential of a game that I've ever played. And honestly, I was going into this game thinking that I was going to absolutely hate it, but instead, I just came out more sad knowing that the game could have been better. And honestly, that might even be worse. The platforming is pretty solid, and even the ego powers are actually a pretty decent addition to the game, because there's some pretty challenging puzzles that felt really rewarding once you beat them. But then when we get to all the other stuff, the game just goes downhill so fast. The combat in this game is annoying. It just devolves into button mashing. The gun gameplay doesn't have the depth that it did in Jak 2 and 3. Plus, you don't even get the weapon upgrades like in Jak 3. All the environments in this game are ugly. They're completely empty, and the quick time events are repetitive and require no skill whatsoever. And I don't know why they did this to Daxter. And the playing gameplay is so bad. I know it's about like 5 minutes of ranting about how much the planes suck in the review, but I just can't help it. The planes in this game are garbage, and they're probably the worst part of the game, probably the franchise too. They also use the planes to hide the fact that this game is an open world, and just makes traveling in this game just such a drag, and the less said about the dogfighting missions, the better. It's not that the story's any better either. I don't want to spend too much time on the story, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. It's about how Jak, Daxter, and Kira are going through an ego drought. Not only the story is a mess, but it just isn't entertaining for me either. The characters are boring, and the models barely even emote either. Jak and Kira are so bland that you can replace them with cardboard cutouts and you get the exact same results. And even though Daxter can be a little bit annoying in the past, this is probably the worst written version of Orange Lightning. And not only that, but there's so many inconsistencies in the story if we're taking the other games into account. 1. How can ego just run out? Everything in the Jak and Daxter universe is made out of ego. Wouldn't that mean that the very thing that they're standing on would just completely vanish? 2. Jak can't turn into Dark Jak because the ego is too unstable. So if that's true, then why the f can he use ego powers whenever he pleases? And just to add on to that, why can't Jak turn into Dark Jak, but Daxter can turn into this? And 4. In Jak 4, it was confirmed that Daxter was a precursor because of Precursor fossils, and since Daxter was already a precursor, he would have turned into a Dark Maker since those are precursors who were tainted by Dark Ego. Did the writers just not realize how stupid this story was? Overall, this game is terrible, but I don't really feel comfortable calling it the worst game I've ever played. I mean, don't get me wrong, the game's still shit, but in the platforming segments, it feels like there is actual effort put into this game. But just because the game has effort put in it doesn't automatically make it good, but it's definitely something that I can appreciate. But when you get the same team who made the 2 most hated Ratchet & Clank games in the series, something's gonna get lost.
There she is! Let's get her!
Ratchet, do you notice anything unusual about Luna?
Well, she does seem to have an unusually large door in the back of her head.
Are you pulling my dick, bro?
So while I don't think that this game is outright atrocious, I still agree that's a pretty poor excuse for a Jak and Daxter game. And here's something that I forgot to mention in my review of the game. Naughty Dog themselves said that the game sucks. They even said that they were so disappointed that the last Jak and Daxter game in the series was a shitty PSP spin-off. I mean, I can go on about how much this game sucks, but I already made an entire video on it, so let's just move on.
Oh, shit! I can't!
So Lost Frontier was the only game in the series that was actually awful. So now we're getting into the part of the series where the games aren't bad, but aren't amazing either. I'd comfortably say that these games are pretty mid. Still pretty great games, but I wouldn't say they're amazing though. Starting off this section, we have this PSP spin-off, Daxter. Daxter is actually a pretty decent game. It was the first game that wasn't developed by Naughty Dog, and it was developed by Ready at Dawn, and it was their first game too. So this game takes place in between Jak 1 and Jak 2, from 2 years from when Jak got kidnapped by the Baron, and so the story goes up 2 weeks before Jak was saved by Daxter. Yeah, storytelling isn't really this game's strongest aspect either. I don't think it's as bad as Lost Frontier, but it's definitely the weakest part of the game. Most of the characters in this game aren't really that interesting, and some of them are just copies of other Jak characters. I already said that Tarn was just Ashland, but Simon is pretty much the sculptor from the first game, and Caden was a pretty bland villain, but I will definitely take this game story over Lost Frontier. But the gameplay picks up the pieces though. This game kinda has the same mission structure from Jak 2, but the missions take longer to complete. Haven City is still the main hub of the game, but it isn't as expansive as it is in Jak 2, which makes sense since it's on the PSP. Most of the missions involve bug extermination. There are some uses of the zoomer in Breeze Valley or the ranger zoom in at an Emerald Isle to complete other objectives. Then there's the dream mode side missions, which don't really have anything to do with the story, but can teach Daxter new techniques which are ripped straight out of Jak's moveset, or upgrade his hit points. The combat in this game is honestly kinda janky. Daxter has a swatter where he can do closer range combat, which is kinda cool at first, but then after a while it just gets kinda repetitive. Your spray gun is your ranged weapon, but you have 3 different versions of them. First is a regular spray gun, which does a lot of damage on smaller bugs. Next is the flamethrower, which pretty much just incinerates bigger bugs, or just makes them spontaneously combust. Finally, there's the electric bomb, which takes up more fuel on the spray gun, but has a bigger blast radius. Next is the vehicles, which are all pretty brief. The scooter is for navigating Haven City faster, the service zoomer and the ranger zoomer is for the missions in Breeze Valley and Emerald Isle. You only do these kinds of missions 4 times, and they don't really take that much time in the gameplay either. Honestly, out of every game in the entire series, this game manages to keep it 75% platforming and 25% other stuff. Radiant Dawn did a pretty top-notch job on the platforming in this game. The level design is pretty good too, and they accommodate for Daxter's smaller frame, like how he can crawl, climb, and zipline too. Besides the crawl, all these moves have pretty good uses throughout the game, and they're pretty fun to use too. You can also use the spray gun to hover over big gaps, and there's a lot of fun platforming with that too. My favorite levels in this game are probably the Baron's Palace and the prison levels. These are pretty great final levels. It tests everything you know about the game at this point and puts all your skills to the test. But also all pretty challenging too. I know I've already said this, but the prison level does a really great job making Daxter feel like he's on a secret mission, because you're sneaking around the Crimson Guard, and the level's just really fun too. But the game isn't perfect though. I do have one problem with the game, and that's to do with control. Daxter is pretty fun for the most part, but for some reason, and I don't see many people talk about this in their reviews, but Daxter just can't run straight. Like, Daxter just can't run in a straight line without shifting over to the left a little bit. You have to make sure that the analog is precisely facing forwards, but other than that, I don't have anything to complain about with Daxter. The other gameplay styles don't really satisfy me that much, but the core platform of the game is probably some of the best platform in the series I've ever seen. So without much I've been praising this game a lot, you're probably wondering why it's pretty low on the list. Well, mainly it's because I don't really see myself coming back to this game like I will with the original trilogy, or maybe even Jak X. I did like the game, but I just don't really have a reason to come back to it other than 100% completion to get the Daxter Mobile on Jak X, but I don't have a PSP to get on my PS2, and even then, I could just get the PS4 version of Jak X and just get the Daxter Mobile there, and also maybe a Let's Play, but that's all I could think of. I think if I played this game when I was like 5 years old maybe, then I would probably spend dozens of hours on this game, but now, yeah, maybe not too much. But other than that, Daxter did a pretty good job on just being a portable Jak game that someone can play on the go, at least better than Lost Frontier did anyway. But I just have one question. When is Daxter going to be on the PS5? We're at Jak S to the PS4, so what's taking so long, Sony?
It's over. Get out of my car now.
It said 1760.
Get out of my car now.
Sir, it said...
Get out of my car now!
So this might be a little bit of a hot take, but Jak 3 is definitely my least favorite in the trilogy. I still think that it's a good game, but I just don't think that it holds up as well as the first 2 games. This game is basically just Jak 2 except in the desert and without that huge difficulty spike. I mean, there is still some positives about Jak 3. I think the story is best out of the trilogy. I mean, it starts out slow when you're in the desert, but it's supposed to pick up once you get back to Haven City. There's still some problems I have with Jak 3's story though. Kira was completely ruined this game. She was casted aside so Ashley could be the main love interest in this game, which was completely forgot about in Jak X, but whatever. And that resulted in making her a shell of her former self, with like 3 to 4 lines in the entire game. Another problem I have with this game's story is honestly Jak himself. When Ashlyn begs him to come back to Haven City, Jak says that he doesn't care about what happens to the people in there since they banished him, but as soon as he comes back to Haven City, he's gonna be excited to see Samuels and Kira, and also later on he says that he has his own interests, but said interests were never really explained or given any depth. That might have to do with the fact that there was only 1 year of development between Jak II and Jak III. All the ambitious stuff they had planned for this story didn't really reach their full potential. Then there's a big reveal about the Precursors being assholes, which some might have found this kind of funny, but me personally, I just thought it was kind of disappointing. I think Samuels has the best here.
My life's work, it turns out, was spent searching for a bunch of furballs.
So the story might have its problems, but I still enjoyed it for what it was. The gameplay is basically the same from Jak 2, but this time there's a lot less focus on running and gunning gameplay that the series has been known for, and it's honestly for this reason I don't really like this game as much as Jak 2 or even Precursor Legacy. There's just way too many mini games in Jak 3. The biggest change in gameplay are the cars, and they kinda suck. They're not awful, but they definitely haven't aged that well in my opinion. I mean, I still take this over flying in Lost Frontier, but they still aren't really that fun. Their physics are completely slippery and everything trips you over, which makes me even more glad that they fixed the car physics in Jak X, but we're not there yet. Other than that, the minigames are either good, bad, or just downright terrible, and am I the only one who got Mr. flashbacks from Sly Cooper from this minigame? My favorite parts of this game are just me platforming and shooting a couple enemies, but this game is only 40% platforming, the other 60% is vehicle sections. I mean, the difficulty curve has been toned down since Jak II, and the checkpoints are so much more generous, but this game just doesn't really focus that much on the traditional Jak and Daxter running and gunning gameplay. I know this game is a lot of people's favorite in the trilogy, and if you're one of those people, then just don't care about what I say. Keep enjoying the game if you want, but I just don't really like this in the game as much as I used to. I mean, the game's still pretty fun when it's just platforming, but that's pretty much it. But now we're getting on to the games that I personally consider the best in the entire series, so let's start off with...
I don't think you have any idea how fast I really am. I'm fast as fuck, boy.
Now, what can I say about Jackass that I haven't already said in my review of the game? Honestly, I think I might like it just as much, maybe even more than Crash Team Racing. Like, I'm being serious right now, that's how much I like this game. The game's driving mechanics has so much more depth than CTR. While some of the game modes aren't that good, most of them are more hit than miss in my opinion. And the music's probably the best in the series. I also love how it's one of those games where you need to master your skills, and it feels really satisfying when you perfect everything in this game. Like, the power sliding mechanics are a perfect example of this. Like, when you first start out, power sliding might be pretty frustrating to do in this game, but once you figure out that you can do a complete 180 whenever you're power sliding, then you'll be able to pull off sharp turns in this game in no time. And the track design is really good too. I personally like racing games that are a bit more non-linear and have more shortcuts that you can take. But honestly, how the cars handle this game, I think the track design works because the heavier handling physics, trying to pull off tight turns every second might not be as fun. I mean, the sitting and silver levels still suck though, but that's only the really bad levels in this game. I also love how there's different types of races in this game too. There's long races, short races, some of them are even one lap. I like that kind of design. It gives you more time to try and come out in the first place. Sometimes some of these races are so long that I keep on figuring that the second half was the last one, and I barely scratched the surface on what makes this game so great, like the cool features that you can unlock, like playing as Daxter or Pecker, or even playing as older versions of Jak, or even playing as the characters from Daxter in this game too. And there's the Daxter mobile you get when you have 100% save all as Daxter. You can even play as Ratchet too. So much about this game is so great, but there is one reason why I don't rate it any higher, and it's something that Naughty Dog usually gets right: the story. I mean, I think the story is still better than Daxter and The Lost Frontier, but I don't think it's as good as Jak II or Jak III. But to be fair, there aren't really that many problems with this game's story. In fact, Naughty Dog even rectified one of their mistakes in Jak III and turned Kira back to her normal self, and she and Jak finally get that kiss too, so it's a win for everyone. But yeah, this game's pretty amazing. I don't think I've played a racing game where I've actually wanted to get better at playing it. The only other game that comes to mind is actually the other car races that Naughty Dog made, CTR. Here, I want to get better. Like, I want to come out top in every race. I mean, I could keep on gushing about why I love this game, but, you know, there's already a review for that, so let's move on to the final two games.
Looks like it will only open if we fill all 100 holes with power cells.
Oh boy, here we go again!
No, I didn't make an editing error. Jak I isn't first on my list. I know there's going to be a bunch of people saying how wrong I am, but at least in my opinion. So this game's probably the furthest thing from a bad game. In fact, I actually think it's pretty excellent. In fact, I think it's probably one of the best games on the PS2. I mean, like, where to start? The near perfected platforming, the low free areas, the beautiful landscapes, the amazing level design, the great collectibles. It's honestly hard to find anything to hate about this game. The platform in this game is so great, and like the controls too. Jak controls really smooth, and its physics have that perfect balance of not being too heavy while also not being too floaty either. And almost every death you'll suffer from is mostly your own fault. And the level design too, like it's so top notch, and they make the already perfect control feel so much better than they already do. The feeling of exploration is apparent as soon as the first level. You find these precursor ores going to another area, you follow the trail of precursor ores, and you're immediately onto another level. And that feeling's also in the final boss, you're riding a huge elevator instead. And when you consider how early this game came out during the PS2's life, this is a pretty impressive feat. Then there's the other stuff like the Flood. The thing is so fun to ride. I just wish there were more levels with it, but because it was way more fun than the Zoomer. I don't really think too highly of the Zoomer in this game. It's not really bad, but a whole level dedicated to it was pretty unnecessary. Honestly, the only one thing I don't like about this game. So much stuff to enjoy here. I like the platforming challenges to collect power cells and precursor ores, and how it doesn't feel like there's too many collectibles in this game while still having enough to keep people entertained for a little while. I played this game so many times I actually deleted save files just to start a new game. That's how much I love this game. So I can already hear you guys typing in the comments, well man, if you like this game so much, then why is it only at number 2? I mean, I do love this game. I honestly go as far as saying this is one of my favorite PS2 games, but there's still some problems I have with the game though. Aside from Daxter, Jak I is probably the easiest game in the series. That might be because I've been playing this game for a while now. I'm not really a god at this game or a speedrunner, but I've been playing this game for a really long time, so I'm bound to be pretty good at it. But yeah, this game is pretty easy, but most of the difficulty comes from collecting all the precursor orbs and power cells, but which even then is still pretty easy. And the game's also pretty short too. Even though I played it multiple times, it only took me 6 hours to beat the game. Oh, even when I live streamed the game, when I did in like 2020, well, it's really almost been like 2 years since I've done that stream. Both lengths of those streams combined goes up to 6 hours long, and that's collecting all the Precursor orbs and Powercells too, and also all the characters in this game that you interact with are complete pieces of cardboard. Not the main characters though, they're fine. Those people you meet inside the worlds are just all people who want you to do this thing for a Powercell. I'd rather pay them 90 Precursor orbs, and the secret ending kind of sucks too, but it's kind of for that reason why I don't like Jak 1 as much as the top pick. I know people will find the difficulty in this game's short length as positive, so it all results in a pretty relaxing experience that you'll complete in over a weekend, but not for me personally. So now let's get to what, in my opinion, is the best Jak and Daxter game.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for. Duh.
Preparing the best Jak and Daxter game.
Okay, so hear me out. I know a lot of people don't like Jak II that much, but in my opinion, this is probably my favorite game in the entire series. There's so many great changes that this game brings to the series as a whole. First, let's talk about the story first. Jak 1 had a pretty basic story about finding all the collectibles in the game, but here, this is a game that started Naughty Dog's more serious storytelling. And the characters here are so much more interesting than the brick walls in the first game. Torn, Ashland, and Zeke, and everyone else are pretty great supporting characters. Jak has more of a personality this time, which makes his dynamic with Daxter all the more funnier. It's kind of a love triangle between Jak, Ashland, and Kira. Cor's a pretty cool villain. Character interactions in this game are great to listen to, and the Dark Tones pull off really well too, but the game's not afraid to be its old playful self every now and then. And there's also so much more depth to the gameplay too. So this game is basically if Ratchet and Clank had a crossover with GTA. There's a bigger focus on missions in this game. You go into one area, then complete one challenge, and then go back to somewhere and talk to someone else and go do another mission. Driving in Haven City isn't really as bad as people make it out to be. I mean, it can be a little bit annoying, but that's pretty much it. Honestly, I kind of like this structure even more than the first game. But then it's time to talk about the biggest change to the gameplay: weapons. This game has a bigger focus on combat than the first game. Jak has 4 guns. I know in my review I said that the only gun you'll be using the most is the morph gun, but honestly, if you start using the scatter gun a lot more, then you should be pretty good. I learned this from Powercell Zeke's video on Jak II, and if you haven't seen this video, I highly recommend you do it. It's a really good video. I'll leave a link in the description. Anyway, the guns in this game gives the combat more depth, since before it was just one punch and they're dead. Here you have to actually strategize what gun might be best for you, or see what gun deals the most damage, and just like in Daxter, the game makes you find out for yourself which gun to choose. I mean, this doesn't mean that there's no platforming in this game. It's still here, but it's just mixed with the more complex combat. Platforming is still one of the best parts of the game, since Jak control is basically the same as before. I also love how, unlike in Jak 3, the game does a pretty good job on keeping the combat and platforming the main focuses on the game. I like to divide this game up into 20% missions and the other 80% in platforming and shooting. The graphics are probably one of the best parts of the game too. I honestly would have confused Jak II for a PS3 game if I haven't played a single game in this series. That's how good this game looks. No other games can compare to Jak II at the time. So yeah, from how much I've been praising this game, you can see why I put this at number 1. Honestly, I can't think of anything about this game that's genuinely bad. Well, except for one thing, and yeah, we're going there. If you've seen any other review of Jak II on the internet, then you know exactly where this is going. Jak II can get pretty hard. Well, if you're a pussy. Alright, I'm not gonna act like I've never rated this game before, because I have. I mean, the difficulty isn't too bad in the first 2/3 of the game. There's an occasional spike in difficulty, but it isn't really that bad. You can beat it if you keep going at it. But then you get to the final third. Okay, I feel like Naughty Dog was listening to all the people, and by all the people I mean just me, saying that the first game was too easy. So to fix that, they decided to make this one of the hardest fucking games I've ever played. And the final third, just goddamn. Almost every single mission in this final third is so painful. The final race with arrows is the worst of all of them. I thought it's impossible to complete a hard Mario mission without dying at least once. The stupid mech, which is the complete opposite of what a mech is supposed to do, and the fucking escort mission with Jinx and his gang through the sewers, who can't defend themselves for shit but have no problem pulling their gun out you whenever you accidentally hit them. And apparently Naughty Dog forgot what checkpoints are, so every time you die, you're put back to the start of the mission. And to top it all off, Jak only has 8 hit points, which, I mean, it doesn't really sound that bad. But some of these metalheads take a huge chunk of your health, which means that Jak only took up 2 hits from bigger enemies. And it's because of this difficulty spike at the final third that most people prefer Precursor Legacy or even Jak III over this game, which is fine, that's fair enough, but I don't think that it's enough to ruin how much fun I had with this game during the first 2 acts. And when you finish a really hard mission, you really feel like you accomplished something. Other than that, I have no problem saying that Jak II is my favorite game in the entire series. So now that's finally done. I've finally done everything I wanted to do with Jak and Daxter now. I don't know when I'm going to do a Let's Play on Jak II, maybe sometime this year, but I feel like I've talked about Jak and Daxter enough already. I'm not sure there's a lot of you wondering when I'm going to look at Sly Cooper, but no worry, I'll go to those games soon. I just want to make sure that I'm really ready to tackle those games. But that being said, I want to know how you guys have ranked the series. Let me know in the comments and tell me how wrong my list is. But anyway, for the next review, I'm going to be going after Crash Bandicoot. This is a video that I've been putting off for a while, but I'm finally going to do it. And before I end this video, I want to give a couple of shoutouts to some smaller channels, just to help their channel grow. I mean, being in my videos won't really help your channel grow, but just want to contribute. So first shout out is going to be to Horror Kid. Actually makes the same content that I do, makes reviews and top 10s, and does some Let's Plays too. He's currently working on a Final Fantasy 13 retrospective, so yeah, go check him out. The shout out I want to give out is a young Croc Lord. He's actually doing Jak and Daxter marathon right now too, so go check those guys out, links in the description. So yeah, anyway, with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.